In the early morning hours, on a dark desert highway, a tour bus collides violently with a semi-truck trailer. In an instant, lives are lost. Then an investigation begins and reveals a silent killer on the country's highways. It's just after 5 a.m. when a tour bus is returning to Los Angeles after a late-night gambling trip. Just a few miles into the journey, traffic begins to slow down on the highway. It's a quiet ride as most of the 43 passengers are fast asleep, having spent the last 5 hours at the Red Earth Casino. Many are regulars on the bus operated by U.S. Holiday Tours to the casino. They trust the company, which has offered these round trips for 25 years. There's ongoing maintenance work on I-10, so the highway patrol halted traffic while utility workers carry heavy cables across the road. Up ahead, a semi-truck has stopped in the center right lane. When the cars start to move again, the semi-truck doesn't. It's still sitting still in moving traffic. 5 vehicles hastily swerve and manage to change lanes as they approach the stationary truck. But at 67 miles per hour, the bus is moving too fast to react. Seconds later, it plows straight into the semi-trailer. The passengers aren't wearing seatbelts. The devastation is instant. When emergency personnel arrived, they were met with unforgettable images. The bus's front was almost entirely pushed into the trailer, which made it enormously challenging to rescue the passengers. The impact pushed the truck forward, and the bus ended up 13 feet into the semi-trailer. First responders had to use chainsaws to cut through the bus to get to the victims. Tow trucks were brought in, one lifting the trailer to provide better access, while another pulled the truck off of the crushed bus. Firefighters then extended ladders into the exposed windows to get people out. Nearly 3.5 hours after the crash, the last passenger was freed, but the death toll wouldn't be released until much later. This was now one of California's worst road accidents. And so the questions began to emerge. What kept the truck from moving after the traffic cleared? Was there something wrong with the bus? And could it have stopped in time?
In almost 35 years, I've never been to a crash where there's been 13 confirmed fatal accidents. So it's tough. It's tough for all of us.
One of the fatalities was the bus driver and owner of USA Holiday Tours, Teodulo Vides. Over 30 people were injured, including Bruce Gulliford, the truck driver. The investigation into the accident started with these 2 men and their vehicles. Finding answers would involve a year-long process of uncovering who or what was to blame for the tragic accident. Starting with the bus, inspections showed that it was checked annually and approved, even up to months before the crash. But further investigations revealed the tour company's troubled past. At the time of the accident, the 20-year-old tour bus broke federal standards with half the tires dangerously worn down. There were also no seatbelts, but they weren't required by any law at the time it was built. Then the bus's maintenance history was questionable. In the early 2000s, it received bad safety ratings for maintenance, driver behavior, and vehicle equipment. However, records show no more issues after 2010. And the company also had a problematic history of accidents and lawsuits. USA Holiday was sued after a bus crash killed 3 people. Although one lawsuit was dismissed, another was settled after a separate crash injured 2 passengers. Additionally, the driver had multiple traffic violations, including lane straddling, driving with a suspended license, and speeding. But the most surprising discovery made by investigators was that there were no skid marks on the road. This suggested that the driver did not apply the brakes at full force before crashing. The collision happened on a wide road curve. The driver would have seen the stopped truck for over 20 seconds. Even the 5 cars ahead had quickly changed lanes to avoid hitting it. The truck had working tail and marker lights and was also covered with reflective material. Even its cargo door would have reflected the bus's lights. So the truck should have been visible to all drivers. This made investigators question why the bus driver didn't brake or swerve. The report estimated that, based on his routes, the bus driver had only 4 hours of sleep between 6 p.m. on Friday and the 5:15 a.m. crash on Sunday morning. Vides' medical records revealed another startling detail. He showed signs of diabetes, but skipped treatment. The NTSB report suggests Vitas' untreated diabetes might have reduced his alertness, decision-making, and vision. In this case, together with a lack of sleep and fatigue, it likely prevented him from avoiding the truck. But Vitas was not the only guilty party. Interviews with the truck driver were alarming as well. Records showed that the traffic stop lasted approximately 7 minutes. After the car started moving again, the truck remained stopped for 2 minutes until the collision happened. But the driver estimated that he stopped close to 30 minutes. This directly contradicted the evidence. Investigators concluded he didn't know the stop's actual duration. Gulliford further stated that he released the parking brake when the traffic started moving and felt the impact of the crash as he put the transmission into gear. However, the truck's tires showed signs of being locked and sliding on the road, indicating that the parking brake was still set at the time of impact. It was clear to investigators that the truck driver's recollections were inconsistent with the facts. Gulliford's logbooks showed he had enough sleep before the crash, meeting driver requirements for 10 days prior, but he couldn't recall how much. He was on his second leg from Alabama to California. That was until the investigators looked at the truck's GPS data. The tracking system showed Gulliford broke driving rules. He drove over 11 hours daily, 2 hours more than his permitted daily average. On top of that, his body showed severe obesity. This puts him at higher risk for sleep apnea, with extreme daytime fatigue. The NTSB concluded that the evidence and Gulliford's story suggested that he fell asleep. But this was not their final conclusion yet. There was one more culprit. During the incident, a highway patrol officer led the brake but didn't use advance warning signs. The officer left, not noticing a truck still on the road. The NTSB blamed the local transport agency, Caltrans, for not properly closing the lane. After the incident, Caltrans adopted a new policy. Now, traffic breaks must have signs and 2 officers, and staff must have a planning meeting 2 weeks in advance. Further recommendations call for clearer instructions for medical examiners on testing for diabetes and improved methods to detect and treat sleep apnea. The final death toll was 13, with 31 people injured. Most of the deaths and serious injuries occurred in the front half of the bus, which suffered the most damage. The pursuit of justice targeted the bus company and the driver. The bus company had a $5 million insurance policy. The passengers' lawyers are suing Vitas' estate for compensation. However, no settlement has been reached yet. 2 years after the incident, Gulliford was sentenced to 4 years in prison. He was arrested in 2017 on over 40 charges, including vehicular manslaughter and reckless driving. Authorities stated, however, that Gulliford is not the party determined to be most at fault for the collision, suggesting that investigators believe the bus driver who died in the crash was mainly to blame. Watch this episode next if you found this video interesting. Please add a like and leave a comment if you want to support the channel.